Well, we had the case of the Mondays here as Utah Hockey Club fans, as the Utah Hockey Club finally lost against the New Jersey Devils. They got shut out as well, so there wasn't much to be thrilled about. And on top of it, we have a very bad injury that we will be breaking down in this episode of the Clean Hits podcast. But first off, I am Brad, your host. We got Corey and we got Trent from the Clean Hits crew here. How are you guys doing today?
It's game day, so looking to get back in
Yep.
the win column. That game against New Jersey, not only a loss, but just very sleepy. Those afternoon games are always not the most entertaining, and we seem to always have the afternoon in New Jersey, and it's always a sleepy one. So, should be a
Yeah.
little bit more exciting against Anaheim tonight. Not only with the time, but the history between this franchise and Anaheim. So it should be a bit of a spicy one too.
Yeah. How are you doing,
I'm
Trent?
always looking forward to seeing my favorite team go up against the Ducks, who I have personally hated with a burning passion since 1996. The first ever Coyotes playoff series was against these dirty, dirty Ducks, and I've never let go of my grudge the whole time. So I'm looking forward to seeing this one hopefully get heated and hopefully get Utah back in the win column.
Yeah, agreed. And I am on that same boat. The Ducks have always rubbed me the wrong way. And it's interesting. If you were a Coyotes fan, you may be a little bit more privy to this. But the past couple seasons, these two teams have gotten really chippy. I think it was 2 seasons ago. Was it Jay Beagle went right after Troy Terry?
Yeah,
Got him all bloodied up when Troy Terry and I think Zegras were kind of going at the net and running into the
skilling it up.
Yeah, skilling it up with. And then the next season, I think it was where Zegras said something so upsetting to Stetcher that did a line brawl happen, or was it just fights and misconducts and people getting thrown out
It
of
was
games?
very offside. It was so much so that like even the national pundits who got a hold of what was said wouldn't repeat it or even hint at it. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And Brad Marchand had something to say about it and his disdain for Zegras. And so I don't know. These two teams, it seems like some of these younger players on the teams especially just do not like each other. And maybe some things are being said in between plays. Maybe there's some old history with some of the younger guys on the teams, but these are kind of must-watch hockey games if you're a fan of Utah / Arizona Coyotes now. And as these two teams kind of grow together, as they're both kind of coming out of a rebuild around the same time, this could be a fascinating rivalry, even though they're not in the same division.
Yeah, I would hope that the rivalry continues, and it definitely makes them easy to hate that they have not only Zegras but Radko Gudas, who is just a trash bag of a guy. Loves to throw dirty hits and not back it up. Anytime anything bad happens to Radko Gudas on the ice, I love it. I loved watching Jack McBain utterly de-man him in a game last season where Gudas ran away scared like a helpless little child. So it was phenomenal to see that, and I hope that the trend continues and Gudas continues to get his just desserts. I only wish that our spicy tuna was in the game to help spice it up a little bit more, but we will have Michael Carcone tonight.
Yeah, really surprising to see Noah Bryan, especially considering the past history between these two teams. So still going into, what is this, game 5, and no fights for O'Brien yet. So I don't think anyone would have taken that coming into the season. So maybe the next game O'Brien plays.
Yeah, maybe that next home game is where sparks really start to fly there. Well, doing a little bit of housekeeping really quick. This is the Clean Hits Hockey Podcast. We are part of the Clean Hits crew. We also have a blog at cleanhitshockey.com where you can find all of our written segments. We're still kind of cranking through all these player report cards. The Nick Schmaltz one got released today. So if you kind of want to know what's up with Schmaltz and kind of how he fits on the team and maybe how he'll fit in the future, definitely go check that one out. And just so you know, because the team lost once, that means there's only 2 more losses until kind of our quote-unquote inaugural pricing for that cleanhitshockey.com blog. is in place. After 3 losses, the price will be going up. So now's the best time to subscribe to all of our written content. Brent's going to have a whole slew of prospect pieces coming out. So if you want to stay on top of kind of all the kids in the system and understand how guys like Tisha Ginla are doing, or even some of the more kind of deep dive of the prospect pool, how those players are performing, make sure you're subscribed to that blog. And we got a lot of more interesting pieces that will be coming out throughout the season, just kind of talking about the team, talking about trade ideas, all that fun stuff to really help you get obsessed with this team. But yeah, let's get into kind of the big news. And that big news is that Sean Durzi left that New Jersey Devils game with an upper body injury. It sounds like it is something with his hand or wrist. I don't think they've actually disclosed anything. And the last quote I saw from Brogan Houston of the Deseret, from head coach Andre Tournier, is that they'll hopefully know a little bit more about the severity of that injury very soon. So initial thoughts on this?
Yeah, probably the one position where we can't afford to lose somebody right now, especially with John Marino already out, and it doesn't sound like he's really close to returning. They've been really coy about his status. He didn't play at all in the preseason. I don't know if he was even played in the training camp, like the practice sessions, anything like that, but it sounds like he's still a little bit away. And just based on what we're hearing so far around Sean Durzi, it sounds like it's going to be closer to months rather than weeks. So I did see the play on that. They didn't mention on the Devil Suite. I was watching the Devil Suite here in Toronto, and he got dumped into the boards. A bit of an awkward spill. And if it is an arm or a wrist thing, that usually is a longer timeline. So, and like I said off the top, that's probably the one position we really can't afford to lose right now with Marino already out. That really just leaves Ian Cole on that right side. Not much of an offensive game to speak with there. And then if you look at what's available in Tucson, it's really just Maverick Lamoureux, and he could play probably because he did have a pretty good preseason, but the long-term benefit for him right now is just to play in Tucson, not bring him up into this. So we're really short on options on what we could put in that spot in place of Sean Durzi.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money there. Mav Lamoureux is definitely a appealing idea to call up. They went with Patrick Koch, which I think makes sense because Mav Lam has to get his feet under him in professional hockey, and I think the AHL has a lot to offer. It might be better for the Utah Hockey Club right now to call up Mav Lam and see what he's got, see if we can catch some lightning in a bottle, but I don't think that that's the best path for his development. So I think seeing Patrick Koch come up speaks to that they're still playing a little bit of the long game and not willing to sacrifice the future for the short term. Then again, having said that, I don't know that Robert Bortuzzo and Patrick Koch are really going to be viable long-term answers either, provided that everybody else does stay healthy. A bit of an irony here that the offseason was really defined by Bill Armstrong going all in and pushing all his chips into the center of the table to improve this blue line and give us a depth and a breadth and a quality of blue line, the likes of which we haven't seen in many years, only to have it all kind of fall apart here in the first handful of games of the season.
Yeah.
And,
Michael Kesselring, too, on that right side. I should have mentioned him. But he's going to play with Sergachev tonight on that top pairing. But, I mean, Kesselring and Cole, that leaves a huge gap. And even a player like Patrick Koch, he had a really good preseason. He was our top scoring defenseman. He only played 2 games, but he had 3 points. But he's a left-hand shot. So I don't know where he's going to fit. We'll see. He did play pro quite a bit in Europe before coming over to North America. But if this is a long-term absence for Sean Durzi, then I don't think Patrick Koch is going to be a solution for us.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have to get a lot of play by committee for a little bit here. So between Koch and Bertuzzo kind of coming in and out, if Koch just cannot fit the part, maybe that's where we do see Mav Lam get pulled up, give him a little cup of coffee. The good news here, though, is seems like we just kind of need to weather the storm for a little bit to have Marino back. And then the blue line will look pretty similar as far as quality goes as it did these first 4 games, or I guess first 3.5.
as far as kind of at least 3 legit top 4 guys. But man, it looks a lot better when Sean Durzi's in that lineup. I pulled this graphic from Daily Faceoff. I don't know if they got the exact pairings correct, because this one does have Kolyachonok up at the top with Sergachev, but it sounds like Kesselring may be up there as well. I think we'll probably get better ideas after tonight's game or during line rushes before the game begins. But if you're watching us on YouTube, you'll see it's Kolyachonok with Sergachev on the top line, Juuso Välimäki with Kesselring on the second, Ian Cole and Bertuzzo on the third, which feels like that is going to be kind of a little too slow moving to really be able to keep up with the Ducks. So I do have a feeling that's going to be shifted a little bit. But man, that depth does not look good.
It has been confirmed that I believe it's been confirmed that Kesselring's going to play with Sergachev up on the top pair tonight. Is that right, Corey?
Yeah, I'm going to see who reported that earlier, but that was the case, that he's going to, and he's looked okay. And I mean, he is our best option right now on that right-hand side in terms of who can offer some sort of offensive touch.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that, go ahead, Brad.
Well, I was going to comment on that whole aspect of that offensive touch, because this was something this team really lacked last season. And Sean Durzi was really the only one who could be kind of reliable with being able to, make nice tape-to-tape passes, set up plays on the power play. JJ Moser had times where his offense shined a little bit. He's got a nice shot, but overarchingly, he's more of a two-way guy who just wasn't quite the puck mover we needed. With Durzi out and taking a look at that roster, Sergachev is great at moving the puck. He is great at playmaking. He has been a pretty dang good power play quarterback already. And Kesselring has got a lot of offensive flair too. So I still feel like this is in a better situation than the blue line looked last season. But two seasons ago, when they had Chychrun and Gostisbehere, it felt like you had two guys who could eat minutes and move the puck up well and play at least responsible enough.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point there too. I think right now, Bertuzzo is going to play just because he's with the team on the road trip into Anaheim, and then maybe Patrick Koch comes in next game. And I think if they can just band-aid it until John Marino comes back, and then when he comes back, you're kind of no worse off than when Durzi was playing. I mean, they're very different players, but at least there's some stability on that right-hand side. But if it does come out that Sean Durzi is going to miss, 2, 3, 4 months, then there needs to be an addition on this team. Just the loss of Durzi on the power play is huge, right? So, and just getting back as well to the lines for tonight, Mike Folta, the Utah Hockey Club radio broadcaster, reporting that the top pair will be Sergachev with Kesselring, Välimäki and Cole will go together, and then Bertuzzo and Kolyachonok will be that third pair. And Kolyachonok, someone who can play both the left and the right side. Bertuzzo has been a right-hand shot defenseman historically, and for those who don't know a whole bunch about him, because I think he only played once in the preseason, I want to say, just kind of that classic, stay-at-home defenseman. He's older, so he's definitely a veteran presence at this point. So he comes in, he brings that experience. He's got a Stanley Cup ring with St. Louis with Bill Armstrong there, but he doesn't really offer much of an offensive game beyond that. He's very, he's a bit flat-footed as a defenseman as well. It's kind of fits in his whole wheelhouse as a stay-at-home defensive defenseman, but certainly not a replacement for Sean Durzi on that right side.
No, and I think if you look at the usage so far in this very limited season, Juuso Välimäki, interestingly enough, has started 66% of faceoffs in the offensive zone. So Juuso Välimäki, I noticed in the first couple of games, was having some major problems getting the puck out of his corner. He'd get possession of the defensive zone. He was making overly complicated plays, not able to get it up to his winger in a simple manner, up and out of the zone. He was a little bit of a chicken with the head cut off in his own zone. And I think that has led to some of his usage being a little bit more sheltered in nature. Though, his advanced metrics for last season were pretty good for defense. So it's a small sample size, and he has cleaned it up a bit. But I would expect that since Cole, who has the smallest share of offensive zone starts among blue liners on the team, starting only a third of his faceoffs, in the offensive zone is probably going to be paired with Kolyachonok a lot in defensive zone situations. Whereas I suspect that you said Valimaki. No, it was Valimaki and Cole, right? So it'll be interesting to see how that pairing works out with Valimaki having spent the vast majority of his starts in the offensive zone and Cole the vast majority in the defensive zone. So it'll be interesting to see what the coaching staff does with that pairing.
Yeah, and it may be a thing where we see these pairs get mixed up, and I wouldn't put anything in stone for a little bit. Now, looking ahead, there's some light at this tunnel right now. So the expectation is that Marino may be coming back in November. I don't know if that's early November at this point or later November, or mid-November, but after tonight's game against the Ducks, Utah hosts the Bruins on Saturday. They host the Senators next Tuesday, the Avalanche next Thursday. Then they will travel on Saturday, October 26th to play the Kings. Then they will host the San Jose Sharks on Monday, the 28th. Then Calgary on Wednesday, the 30th. That is the rest of the schedule for October. San Jose, Calgary, despite their hot start, and I know all of our friends at the the Clean Hits Discord may not like to hear this. San Jose and Calgary are still considered some of the weaker teams in the league right now. The Kings have some major goaltending issues and defensive issues. Kemper is injured now. They just gave up 3 goals to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the first period. They
got up 8 to Ottawa too.
Yes.
That was a wild game.
Very crazy game. And the Avalanche are no better on their defensive end right now, giving up 20 goals in their first 3 games. That is a lot of games that this team, with kind of these injuries, can potentially win. Once we get into Brad, November, things... What?
So you're saying that all of these teams that they're facing have been train wrecks defensively, and Utah Hockey Club is missing 2 extremely important defensive cogs. So you want to bet the over. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Bet the over.
Yes.
All right. Fair enough.
Be going over, baby. But yeah, that kind of gets us into that November time frame that maybe we get Marino back and things can be stabilized a little bit more. But I do have concerns, and I think we should talk about potential options of what this team can do. I think we've already discussed internally. Coke is going to be kind of the first guy up. If that doesn't work out, maybe we are going to pull Mavlam up sooner rather than later. I am on the side that I prefer him to develop as much as possible in Tucson. Eat as many just greasy, awesome Mexican food down in Tucson to bulk up a little bit, get some of that man weight going before he has to take on teams like Vegas and the Bruins in November. But outside of the team, we have talked internally, and we have some thoughts of maybe Bill Armstrong and the Utah Hockey Club needs to make a move to kind of pad this defensive core for a little bit. And obviously, I don't think we're going to go for a home run here and trade the cupboard and all the draft picks to go for gold here. And, you know, there was a name that was being floated around this offseason before the Sergachev trade with Rasmus Andersson. That would probably be a big swing that I don't predict would happen, but you never know. But smaller tweaks that I think are kind of reasonable. And I'm going to throw out the one that I first came to my head. And this is another one that I was kind of talking about this offseason, a familiar player for this organization, and that would be Connor Murphy, who is on the Chicago Blackhawks, plays a big, rangy defensive game. You may remember that he kind of got in that scuffle with that big hit with Keller, and then kind of actually fought Durzi a little bit. Chicago may be interested in maybe some later picks, maybe a B- C+ type prospect. I know he's a stabilizing force in Chicago. I know they want to be a little bit better. But that may be one of those pieces where if the pick is good enough, and then when it costs a whole lot, we could pull in somebody like Murphy. He is making, what was it, about $4 million a year or so?
4.6
for 2 more years.
4.4
for the next 2 seasons. So that would be a piece against the cap. But I think he could bring a lot of stability, plays a similar game to Marino. And I think that is kind of a step up from bargain bin shopping on this Band-Aid. That could be nice depth down the road. If next season there's more defensemen making the roster, or we set out to acquire some more UFAs, he could be kind of the new Bertuzzo, where he's kind of coming in and out of the lineup as well. But that is the first name that came to mind for me. How about you two?
Well, I would say that so I'll get to Murphy, but I think we missed one obvious internal candidate here. The clearer answer is to just call up Victor Soderstrom, right? Like, he'll fit like a glove. It's perfect. He's tailor-made to fill in for Sean Durzi. So you just call him up from Tucson, where he did re-sign a contract and agree to get sent down, right? Or did he? He took his ball and went home, didn't he? Oh, no. Poor Victor.
Hey.
Yikes.
Gonna need a new agent.
Oh, man. He's got to be looking at this Durzi news and just thinking, why? Why me? All right, Victor, enjoy playing back home in Sweden. I'm sure he's going to have a long and fun career back there in Europe. I think with Connor Murphy, he'd be a great fit. He's been on the team before. He's well known to some of the players who've been around a while, the Kellers and the Krauses of the world. I do wonder, though, if a player such as Murphy is available so early in the season. You know what I mean? I think that Chicago is open to anything at this point, as they're cutting very deeply in their rebuild and looking like a team that's shooting for first overall yet again. But Bill Armstrong doesn't love to get leveraged. He's accustomed to being the guy who has the leverage on the other team, right? So Utah's hurting for defense. They're in a bad spot. Other GMs know that. I mean, how much is Kyle Davidson going to kind of try to hold BA over a barrel to get a premium price for Connor Murphy? And does that make sense just to get us through the next 4 weeks to pay a premium acquisition cost for him? I'm not sure. I guess it really does depend on the price. You mentioned picks, which is logical considering that Chicago is rebuilding. They do have quite a stockpile of picks already. I do wonder if they wouldn't be interested in maybe some insulation on the team as well, maybe up front. Utah is having a hard time getting O'Brien, Yamamoto, Carcone into the lineup. Could this be something where they would like to get their hands on a Carcone? Could it be something maybe a little bigger, where maybe Nick Schmaltz becomes available to them theoretically as somebody to insulate and run shotgun with Connor Bedard? I mean, you get a Taylor Hall, Connor Bedard, Nick Schmaltz line. That's pretty electric. I don't know if that's a price we want to pay for Connor Murphy, though. What do you think, Corey?
The other name I'm going to throw out there, and I like Connor Murphy, but I think a more realistic fit is Timothy Liljegren, and I throw his name out there because, and he's on the Maple Leafs, is his name is already out there. He's not played for Toronto this year. I don't think he was playing too much in the preseason, and I don't believe he's asked for a trade out of Toronto, but I think it's come to the point there where he wants a new opportunity, and Toronto is willing to accommodate that. And you look at reporters like Elliot Friedman, who said his name is out there. He's very much available. Now, I don't know if Toronto is going to give him away, but as much as you speak about leverage with Bill Armstrong, I don't think Toronto has a whole lot with Liljegren right now, because they're right up against the cap. They only have $400,000, and he's not playing, and he makes $3 million. So there's not a lot of teams who want to take on a $3 million player and not send some kind of money back. Now, Utah can accommodate that because they got all kinds of cap space. They got even more when you take out Shea Weber. And if you think of a player who can replace Sean Durzi, Timothy Liljegren is kind of one of the perfect players who could fit that.
Yes.
Very similar to Durzi, where he's not strong in his own end, but he can play very strong offensively. He can play on the power play. He's a right-hand shot. Like I said, $3 million, and that's for this year and next. So it is a little bit more manageable. Where next season, if we do have Marino and Durzi still on that top four on the right hand side, you can put Liljegren on the bottom pair. Or if a player like Maverick Lamoureux is ready at that point, it's a little bit more manageable than the 4-4 for Connor Murphy. And I think, Timothy Liljegren, if you go back to his draft year, he was really high in the rankings when that year first started. And then it was almost kind of like Jacob Chikrin, where he started high in the draft and he fell kind of midway through the first round. And I wonder, too, if just getting out of the Toronto spotlight and coming into the Utah market and just getting away from all the, former first-round pick, playing in Toronto, trying to succeed there, and just getting a fresh start with Utah would really help.
He reminds me a little bit in that way, Corey, of Yusuf Alamaki when he hit the waiver wire and Arizona picked him up, a former very high first-round pick that has unquestionably high upside, but hadn't really been able to put it all together in a consistent way and win himself a consistent spot on a roster in a high-pressure market with big expectations based on draft pedigree. And Yusuf Alamaki came to Arizona, had a great season. Last year had a pretty good season. And this year we've got high hopes that he's going to be a solid member of this blue line core. And it could be that Liljegren is similar in that regard, that maybe, as you said, when he comes here, and he's not going to go many places that are going to slide him right into the kind of role he's tailor-made for. But with that big hole missing in the lineup for Sean Durzi, this is a unique opportunity for a guy to actually come in and go from healthy scratch to power play. Right? That doesn't happen very often. And that's where he's going to shine. So the nice thing about Liljegren is if we were to bring him in, we'd know pretty quick whether it's going to work out or not, and whether he's going to be a piece for us moving forward. It presents an interesting option as a guy who's 25. And if he were able to catch a foothold here and start to live up to his previously very lofty expectations, he can even be a core piece potentially. I think it all comes down to acquisition cost, right, Brad? I mean, I don't know what you think would be a fair payment to Toronto, or the kind of thing they might be looking for.
Well, Toronto is in a win now mode. The window is open right now. And to me, that means the more ammo you have to be able to spend around the deadline, the better. So I don't think they would mind one of those later seconds or thirds that we may have, rather than having to just get picks from this draft, because if they're sending it off to the Sharks or Calgary or Chicago to get a vet to add to that team to make a playoff run, those teams would be perfectly happy with later picks rather than this upcoming draft too. And that right now is kind of where the treasure chest is still stockpiled and kind of busting at the brims, if you will, where this 2025 draft picks are a little bit slimmer. So, yeah, I think
that's a great point. Yeah, I mean, if you were able to give them like a 26 second or something, and maybe a little bit more, and then they turn around at the deadline and turn that right into like Mario Ferrero or somebody like that, who's maybe a little bit better fit for what they need right now and in the playoffs, then that sort of liquid asset flipping the pick into something that can help them win now later does make a lot of sense. And I think, to your point, Corey, they don't have the leverage right now because they've got a $3+ million asset as a healthy scratch when they're right up against the cap. I think they need a dance partner as bad as we do.
Yeah, I think for Toronto, just if you can delete that contract from your cap hit and free up that $3 million, that's the win. That's more valuable than getting a second a second is not too bad, but a third round pick back. Yeah. And if you're a fan of the Maple Leafs, that's not too exciting. But like Trent said, you just, and Brad, you as well, you just take that return and bank it until the deadline. And when you have a better idea of what your needs are, and then you can flip that pick for something that will really help the roster entering the playoffs.
Can I throw out another name that's in the same vein as Liljegren? Yeah. Okay. So there's a guy who is getting some playing time now, but had a hard time getting into the roster, into the lineup regularly in New York. And the Rangers have been desperately trying to keep this guy off of waivers for years now, but haven't really been able to find a spot for him until this year with Lindgren, with Ryan Lindgren injured. Zach Jones has been able to get into the lineup. Now he's still playing third pairing minutes, but Lindgren's due back this week, and Jones is probably going to come out of the lineup again. And at a certain point, they're going to have to cut this kid loose. He's been all potential all along. He's almost 25 now, and he's never really had a shot on that contending team to get into the lineup regularly. He's a left-handed shot, maybe not as ideal as Liljegren in that regard. The acquisition price would probably be a little bit lower, I think. His cap hit certainly is. And that might be somebody we could look at too if New York decides to do a solid by the player and not keep hoarding him for depth.
Yeah, my thinking would be if you're going to bring someone in, I think the priority should be a right-hand shot. I do think Zach Jones is better than any of the left-hand options we have in Tucson right now, but I think if you're going to bring someone in, they need to be able to play on that right side in place of Durzi, especially if it does come with I mean, Liljegren could be basically free, but if it's Zach Jones or another player where you have to pay a higher acquisition cost, I think they need to address the needs a little better.
Yeah, I'm going to lean on Corey's side with this too. And especially the handedness factor with Zach Jones. But I'm going to lean a little bit on the side of New York looks like they're going to be a cup contender to me. That roster up and down the lineup, the depth is top notch. And those pieces become valuable down the road. I have a feeling if they can't absolutely hang on to Zach Jones, that's going to be more of something that they move as part of a trade deadline to acquire maybe another depth defenseman in case they need that. But yeah, that's another interesting idea. Now, may I kind of go back down to that veteran presence, a la Connor Murphy that I brought up before, and talk about another team that's kind of sitting near the bottom. Well, I guess they have won and lost one, and this team is going to become much more familiar with them tonight. But a team that doesn't have the highest expectations as it's the Anaheim Ducks and long-term defenseman Cam Fowler on that team. Now, this one would probably be somewhere, probably right now, the highest acquisition cost out of the players we have brought up. As Cam Fowler's been a long-term Duck, has been there since he was drafted, has been a borderline top pairing defenseman. I would argue that he has been a top pairing defenseman at many points in his career, but is now on the bit of the older side and is a little bit on the decline and only has a couple more years on that contract, but could bring a lot to this team as far as stability and two-way play. Now, this is one of those situations where I don't.
And Brad, you froze a little bit there. But yeah, to your point, I think if Zach Jones is not an option because the Rangers are too good, we might as well look at a team that sucks, which is the Ducks. I hate them, and we should free Fowler from them. Free Fowler, get him to Utah. But yeah, it's a good point. Fowler can play up and down the lineup. He is a left-hand shot, Corey, but to your point, he's been comfortable in his career playing the right side as well. So we need a right side defenseman. He can play the right side despite being a left shot. Acquisition cost probably a little bit high. Timing's going to be tough. Once again, this is a little bit more like the Connor Murphy situation where the Ducks probably can deal this player for the right return. It's just whether or not they want to deal him right now and how much that drives up the cost, right, Corey?
Yeah, I think that's a tricky one, right? Because it would come with such a higher acquisition cost than any of the other names we've talked about. I know he wouldn't be on the scale of like a Rasmus Anderson or something like that, but would be a higher acquisition cost. And then where does he fit moving forward? Where, you know, are you going to have left side defensemen coming in with Simishev, and you already have Sergachev on the left hand side. Now, I mean, if you're trying to find a roster spot for Cam Fowler, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but I think it might be kind of an overblow for what we're trying to replace here.
That's true. It feels like paying the price for Fowler, who's got 2 years left, and he's this veteran presence just to get through, 4 or 6 lean months on the blue line may be an overreaction.
Yeah. So I do think one other option we can talk about is, I mean, especially with all this talk about cost of acquisition, is if you can get a player for just cash, so going the UFA route. Kevin Shattenkirk is a name out there. Now, we saw what's his name? He just got a deal with Calgary. Tyson Barrie was
Tyson Barrie.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So he got a contract with Calgary off a PTO. Now I don't think Kevin Shattenkirk took a PTO anywhere. So he must be holding out for a contract, right? And fair enough. He's a proven player. He He's kind of past the PTO phase, right, where he should be able to just sign a contract and come in. You talk about a player who can replace Sean Durzi. They're very similar size. He really excels on the power play. He's not great in his own end. He's not great 5-on-5. But if you're just looking for a temporary stopgap, if you can bring in Shattenkirk on a 1-year deal, and then you just wash your hands of him at the end of the year, then that could be perfect. Now, Kevin Shattenkirk is definitely taking a step back from the player he was in St. Louis. Do you remember actually the year he entered unrestricted free agency? And it was just wild. And it was just kind of funny where that was the best free agent available this year. And then I think he got the big deal with the Rangers and it didn't work out. And then he's kind of floated around since. He's been to Tampa. I think he was in Washington for a bit, I want to say. And then he was with Boston last year. Now, he's not the player he was once with St. Louis, but I do think he can come in and play 15, 18 minutes on the right side. You can put him on the power play and he won't look out of place.
Yeah, and I think all these players that we're talking about is kind of a nice color swab of different types of defensemen, whether they're more that stay-at-home, rangy defensive defensemen like Connor Murphy, or more offensive guys like Liljegren and Shattenkirk and whatnot, and then the different ideas of acquisition costs. So whenever you're kind of feeling out trades, especially in the NHL, picks go a long way in the NHL. I don't believe basketball is quite the same. A second round pick is fairly valuable in the NHL. First rounds are obviously extremely valuable. And then the way the prospect pools work with players developing at different rates through different leagues, there may be even teams who kind of have their pulse on some of your prospects because they're more in that territory or closer to where that player may be playing often. And there's obviously the coaching aspects, assistant coaches in your minor league teams who are maybe be more familiar with those players. All that kind of comes into this big factor. And I think that's why we wanted to use all these different examples of potential trade options. So I think these are some of the bigger targets, or maybe not big targets, but kind of ones that came up when we were brainstorming a little bit, because it's got to be a fit with the team who will be making that trade as well. I think there's one other one we wanted to talk about that would be kind of maybe a home run. It would be risky. It would probably cost quite a bit. But man, he was one of my favorite players in the 2022 NHL draft, and I know Trent loved him as well. And that'd be David Urasek. So Trent, this was one that we kind of mentioned. This one, I believe this name got floated around on the Clean Hits Discord last night when some of the fans were kind of chatting about this too. What are your thoughts on what that may cost? Why would Columbus be willing to part with a top 10 defensive pick from just a couple years ago? And how would that look on maybe this blue line / in the grand scheme of what Bill Armstrong is looking for in a player?
Yeah, I think to answer your first question, how much would it cost? I think an absolute fortune. And I think to answer your second question, why would Columbus look to move him? Well, they probably wouldn't. But if there's a slight chance, a glimmer of hope that they might, it would be this. He's been a healthy scratch all year. He can't crack the roster. And this is the second coaching staff in which he's had issues cracking the roster with in Columbus. This is the second management group that's been in a bit of a sticky situation with this player. Columbus has kind of cleaned house at the top, cleaned house behind the bench. David Urachek's situation doesn't really seem to be improving from when he had some kind of public frustrations last year. So it could be a situation where a trade like David Urachek would almost certainly never happen in the first month of a season. But there's not usually a team like Utah who's in desperate need of a defenseman in the first month of the season, has all kind of cap space and all kind of assets to make it happen, and happens to be in a position of their rebuild where adding a cornerstone piece like this for both now and in the future makes a ton of sense. So it's a pretty unique convergence of events that might make something like this happen. It's a long shot. The odds are slim, but this is a player on the right side that could be a foundational piece moving forward and checks all those Bill Armstrong boxes of being big and skilled and a fast skater for his giant size and a physical presence, and really looks like a Utah player of the future, according to what Bill Armstrong is building. It could be just like a tremendous addition to a blue line featuring like Sinishev and Lamara and some of these other big defensemen moving forward.
Yeah, definitely like the age factor when it comes to Juracek. He's only 20 years old. And there's nothing beyond Maverick Lammer. There's nothing coming on the right-hand side. The pipeline it's empty. So to bring in that a long-term piece would be huge. And I think the other thing too with Columbus that Trent hit on is they're kind of starting again there, right? They brought in Don Waddell. They don't really have much of an identity. They have not had much success over their history, so they're kind of starting again. And as far as David Juracek, he was not drafted by Don Waddell, so there's no attachment in trying to, maybe we shouldn't have drafted this player, but we kind of got to hang on to him because I look bad if I traded him, any of that sort of stuff. That's not there because he didn't draft him. I think they're just going to go for a fresh start in Columbus, and maybe he's a piece of that gets moved out.
Yeah, that would be quite the replacement, if you will, or the Band-Aid, but one that could be really interesting to see how that would develop for years to come on this blue line, and would really help solidify both the left and right side if he worked out.
What's the acquisition
probably
cost?
Have to kiss your exactly.
The first in 2025.
You probably have to kiss your first round pick goodbye, would be my guess, right? It's a big pile of seconds and thirds ain't going to do it.
No.
Now, Columbus, they are kind of starting afresh in many ways. They've got a lot of great assets that they've just drafted. They've got a lot cracking the roster. It's unclear, like what do they want? I wonder. I wonder again. I threw the name out when we were talking about Connor Murphy as a little bit of a long shot. I wasn't sure that I'd be comfortable with losing Nick Schmaltz for Connor Murphy, but for David Juracek all day long. And if that could potentially preserve an AA plus future asset like a first round pick, and there's some combination of Schmaltz and second rounders and lesser prospects that gets us somewhere in the zone of a David Juracek, I'd be all over that. I don't know about you, Brad.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, again, that is a long shot and probably more of a dream scenario here, but why would Columbus want Schmaltz? There's a lot of reasons, actually. He's a fantastic playmaker. He's very good in the neutral zone, even though he will take those off nights. This is a young team. They have a lot of young forwards. They have open spots for a player like Schmaltz to be able to come in there, help generate offense for them, help young guys like Fantilli gain confidence. They will have Caden Lindstrom coming up the pipeline. So right now their center depth looks great. So maybe getting that super skilled winger is going to be something that's appealing to them. He's not maybe on the same side as you would want age-wise for a rebuild, but he's not exactly old either. And that may be one of those pieces that kind of helps bridge the gap between some of these pieces they've built out before and kind of these pieces they're collecting over the past couple years in this rebuild too. So adding a high skilled guy like that would go a long way for this team right now, especially if they want to make sure that there's no stagnation in the development for some of their most prime prospects like Fantilli. And add that with maybe a couple other prospects that are, more on the Julian Lutz side of things, probably the 2025 first round pick and some seconds, and maybe it becomes appealing enough for them to take that risk.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot now that I put it all out on the table like that, but I might
include Schmaltz to try to preserve that first, maybe,
or even if I wonder how far just Schmaltz and that first gets you.
Yeah, maybe all the way, potentially.
That's got to be protected first, though, right? Top 5 protected, just in case this thing crashes into the ground.
Yes, I would agree. Because, Juracek is not necessarily any more proven than Kesselring or Coe.
Yeah. And, one other consideration there is Schmaltz does have some trade protection. He's got a 10-team list, and Columbus sometimes does find themselves on those lists. But what I'll say about Schmaltz is he was born in Wisconsin. He played his AAA hockey with the Chicago Mission. He played for the Green Bay Gamblers in the USHL. He played for the National Development Team program in Michigan. He went to North Dakota for college. He was drafted by the Chicago Blackhawks, played there and for the Rockford Ice Hogs. So this is a guy, until he came to Arizona, had spent his whole life and whole career playing exclusively in like the Midwest, right? So he may not view Columbus the same way some players do, who are maybe from the coasts and look down on potentially playing in or living in Columbus. It seems like Schmaltz might be a little bit more open to the concept.
And we do know that Columbus is looking for a scoring forward too, with the loss of Goudreau, that there is a spot there for a scoring forward. And obviously Schmaltz checks that box.
Yeah. And then Lion A too, moving on as well. This summer. So yeah,
they never replaced him. They just got a defenseman back, right? So that's 2 huge losses.
Yep. So kind of interesting. Now, if I were to kind of rank these as far as fit and likelihood, I think Liljegren would be at the top here.
Some trading history too there, right? Between GMs tend to do that, right? They have a familiarity with GMs. They have, they're on the same kind of wavelength, right? We saw John Chaika make all kinds of deals with Chicago. Don Maloney made all kinds of deals with the New York Rangers, and Bill Armstrong's made a couple of deals before with Tree Living in Toronto. So maybe that could be the starting ground.
Yeah. And Shattenkirk, I don't think it's a terrible option, to be honest. It's definitely a skill set that we are lacking.
Mm-hmm.
Has the right hand.
Another Stanley Cup ring.
There you go.
My thing there too is he hasn't played since last year, right? So he didn't have training camp. He's older. If you sign him, he's probably not playing until start of November, just trying to get up to speed. So if he can't even play for 2 weeks, it kind of takes away from the appeal.
Yeah, it's true. But, it does fit in with the, like you were mentioning, the trade history with GMs and kind of going back to the Shattenkirk's a former Blue, like Robert Bortuzzo, and we've seen Bill Armstrong go back to old Blues players several times with varying degrees of success in his short tenure as an NHL general manager. Most recently with Robert Bortuzzo, and perhaps Shattenkirk could join the fold and be the glory days all over again.
Ian Cole will have a former Blues all on the right side: Bortuzzo, Shattenkirk, and Ian Cole.
Yeah. Well, would Shattenkirk allow Cole to switch back to his left side, though? Well, I guess if you're taking Bortuzzo out, I'm not sure. But yeah, and Shattenkirk again would be a guy who probably would need to be sheltered pretty heavily. So that would mean a guy like Yusuf Alamaki is going to definitely have to step up and play some tougher minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, hopefully Durzi's not out too terribly long, and maybe it is more of a Band-Aid type fix. Otherwise, I don't know. I think this team started off hot enough that there is going to be a desire to try to find some sort of replacement, whether that's via trade or signing someone like Shattenkirk. A couple other items that I think we wanted to bring up. Maybe my favorite thing that's happened in these first couple of games is how good Barrett Hayton has looked. He's already matched his goal total from last season with 3 goals this season. This is a guy we've kind of talked about with Cole last Friday. It starts off extremely slow. I believe in the article that we wrote for his preseason grade, this is exactly what we needed to see to hopefully give him a better grade. As long as he can stay healthy and keep this pace up, holy cow, this really starts to solidify the center depth.
Yeah, that's just the thing with him, right? He just needs a good stretch of hockey where he's not getting interrupted by freak injuries, where he's, standing in front of the net and gets a puck in the hand. And, he blew at his shoulder the Hockey Canada year, and he just needs a good stretch of playing time. And I think he can, as long as he can stay away from their injuries, I think he's finally ready to show the player that he can be.
Yep. And that will do wonders for the center depth too, because it's really him and Cooley as far as our younger guys go right now. Obviously, Baudouin's out there too. But having moved Geeky, it kind of reset what that next young guy's timetable is. There's a couple of other prospects in that pipeline, but they don't quite have that same pedigree that Hayton, Baudouin, and Geeky, and obviously Cooley have as well. So that if he is able to be in that 50 to 60 range for points, 20 goal scorer, you have to be extremely happy with it. If he does anything more than that, this is starting to really take shape. And then one other piece I kind of wanted to bring up. Did you have anything else on that?
Well,
Hayton trend?
Yeah, and I think, his solidifying himself as a top 6 center would be huge for a lot of different reasons that you mentioned. But, we're seeing Jack McBain be able to switch to the wing and provide a really valuable skill set to that Cooley and Gunther line. So it just gives us a lot of options. It allows us to maybe take our time with Cole Baudouin, who, looked so good in camp. That motor is incredible. He's got the frame, he's got the strength, but you really do want to see him develop, and you want to be a little bit more patient with him. I've watched some Barry games this year already. He's looked really good out there. But overbaking prospects is really the ideal way to go, and you'd hate to rush Cole just because Barrett Hayton's underachieving, right? And to see Hayton step up gives us some options, allows us to be a little bit more patient with some of those other prospects.
Well, and speaking of prospects, Tija Ginla is off to a hot start. He had a hat trick already, had a killer assist the other night, cross ice pass. I think he's getting some work at center right now too. So you never know. I think we could probably do a full podcast on Tej and the likelihood of him being a center in the big league, but let's give it some time. Let's see how he does these next couple of weeks. And then another prospect, we got to give a shout out to Jazz Jargon. Make sure you're following him on Twitter, who is Daniil Boot's #1 fan. I do not care that it says #1 Gunther fan on his Twitter profile. It is definitely Daniil Boot, because he clips part of the highlights from games. He shares them, and Daniil Boot had another massive game, no pun intended there, with a goal and 2 assists in the KHL. He is doing things that a 6'8" person on ice skate should not be able to do, and I think he may be one of our most exciting prospects. And it's easy to forget he's kind of waiting in the shadows here and could be making his debut next season.
I took a little bit of heat for putting him #2 on my prospect list.
I know,
ahead
from
of
me.
Simashev. From everybody. They're like, you goofball. But I watched a ton of Daniil Boot play in Russia throughout his career, and I'm a believer. And we keep talking about Boot and Ginla and Baudouin and Hayton and Cooley and Gunther and all these wonderful forward prospects. And it makes me wonder about the long-term future of somebody like, Nick Schmaltz. I keep bringing him up, but maybe that the success of these young forwards and the bright future we have up front maybe makes it a little easier to make a little bit of a change and help us get out of a pinch here.
Yeah, so exciting stuff on the prospect front. And then Vejmelka played his first game for the Utah Hockey Club against the New Jersey Devils. I thought he had a fairly solid game. It was definitely a sleepy game. But what did you guys think of first impressions for Vejmelka? Because he is going to be a critical piece to keep this tandem kind of energized and keep the cog rolling for the defensive game, and obviously the goaltending situation. I think it's very important for him to have a bounce back season this year.
Yeah, for sure. And against New Jersey, probably one of the better players on a Utah team that didn't have a lot of good players in that game. So, that's just kind of, I don't know if that's great for Vejmelka if you're one of the good players on a team that didn't have very many. But as far as his game, like the rebound control still bugs me a lot with him. There's pucks flying all over the place, so got to get that under control. And I think the other thing with Vejmelka is he has to get a win fairly early. I know he won his first game last year against New Jersey of all teams, but then he went on a very long stretch where I think he lost 8, 9, 10 games in a row. And I think confidence is a big thing with him. And I think he's got to get that first win relatively sooner. This could unravel. And I think another thing too with Vejmelka is the team definitely plays different in front of him than they do with Connor Ingram. And a lot of teams do this with their backup goalie. So I don't know if it's a confidence thing where they have more confidence in Ingram that he can bail them out and make those big saves that maybe Vejmelka cannot. But you definitely do see a difference when he's in net compared to Ingram.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money there when you talked about rebound control and some of the other things, positioning. I think Connor Ingram over the summer, when he was describing his game to the media in Utah, he said that he's boring, that he's a boring kind of goalie. And I think that's totally true. Like his fundamentals and his tactics and his positioning and his rebound control and everything is very, very boring. Just very tight, technical goalie, not a lot of acrobatics or athleticism. Other than his last start where he was all over the place and it was insane, that crazy game. I was joking with my 10-year-old. I was like, he described himself as a boring goalie this summer. And he's like, what? This guy needs to stay in his net. I said it on Twitter. I joked. My 10-year-old was saying, stay in your crease. Good goalie, because Connor Ingram was wandering so much. And that's more of Vejmelka's game, right? He's the athletic acrobat, risk taker, definitely much more recklessness in his game. So I do hope to see Veggie get a win soon. I do like this tandem. I like the way that they work together. I'm glad now in retrospect, it was fun to speculate in the offseason that we didn't sell our whole farm and give away all of our cap space to Jeremy Swayman. I do want to see these goalies succeed. I think that we're pretty well covered in net. That Connor Ingram's last game was not your picture perfect, typical Connor Ingram. And I think Vejmelka was pretty strong. So I'm looking forward to seeing this tandem hopefully flourish, and hopefully the limitations of the blue line don't hit our goalies too hard this month.
Yeah, well, I think that rounds up kind of the news and notes that we kind of wanted to go through. Is there anything else you guys wanted to bring up about the Utah Hockey Club?
Just seeing here that in Toronto tonight, Timothy Liljegren is making a season debut. So just something to keep an eye on there. And also seeing David Pagnotta from the fourth period saying that Stars GM Jim Nill's in attendance at the game, but so are 14 other teams' scouts. So, I mean, there's always pro scouts at games, but who knows if maybe there's a Utah one at the game putting some eyes on Liljegren tonight.
Well, Showcase. If anybody can track down that, scouting list, that would be great. But yeah, that's a lot of scouts. That probably is some sort of indication that maybe somebody.
Very odd that he would come back into the lineup when they've just won their last game, right? I don't believe they had any injuries on defense, so very strange for coaches to change the lineup, especially the defense after a win, right? So
showcase time. Yeah.
Sounds like a And I mean, they don't want it to linger, right? They don't want to, do bad by him. They want to, I don't know necessarily again if he wants out, but it sounds like he doesn't have much of a future there. And it sounds like I don't think they're going to make a bad deal and dump him tomorrow, but they're going to try and get this done as quick as they can.
Yeah, I agree. Well,
seems like it would be a good
eyes
fit.
Out.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'd be a fantastic fit. At least, again, a Band-Aid. Maybe develops into something more for this team, but. Once Marino is back, we'll have a little bit more of a player who can help stabilize things. And what we'll lose from Durzi is one of his best skill sets, and it's that offensive side of his play. And I think we'll start to really feel that as more and more games go by. Watch that second power play tonight and see if they're really being able to get the puck moving around as much as well as they were those past 3 games when Durzi was back there. All right, well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Again, this is the Clean Hits Hockey Podcast. 3-4 diehards that are all obsessed with the Utah Hockey Club. We have all of our written content at cleanhitshockey.com. We're going to be putting out 3 to 4 articles a week over there. Tons of prospect reports, player reports. We're going to have some gambling pieces as well. We have a Discord with very, very active game day threads. So if you want to be part of this community, find our Discord. You can find that link on our Twitter, which is x.com/cleanhitshockey. You can also find us on Instagram at cleanhitshockey, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. That will be where you can always find the show. And don't forget, if we get that Instagram account up to 100 followers, we will start to press the Dylan Guenther tribute to ODB Costco shirt. So come on, people, get us there because I want one. I want one bad, and I'm not allowed to make it until we get the following count up, guys. But make sure you're liking, subscribing, engaging with us any which way. We want to grow the excitement about this team. I mean, right now it feels like they're one of the hottest 5 teams in the league. Let's keep it going. Dylan Guenther for the Rocket Richard. we are going to have an amazing season. We are going to have tons and tons of great content coming up. So don't miss a moment. Any last words you guys want to say?
I think Dylan Gunther's
the Ducks suck.
Yep.
And I hate the Ducks, and I hope we spank them. And all fans are welcome in our Discord. We have a lot of Flames fans in there. It's great. The more representation from every fan base we get, except for the Ducks, you are not welcome. Get the hell out. Don't come in our Discord, you losers. All right. Sorry. Go ahead, Corey.
I was just going to say, Dylan Gunner is going to go duck hunting tonight.
Yes, please.
That could be another show idea.
I hope none of my 8U players see this. I coach an 8U team. They're actually the Ducks. They're the Ducks this year. So cruel irony. We're doing Let's Go Ducks chants and stuff like that for my little youth hockey team. So I mean the NHL Ducks I hate. You guys, my Mites team, you guys are great. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. And again, reach out to us whenever you want. We are always here to answer questions. Just find us on our socials. And I think tonight, you may be watching this tomorrow, but we're going to be starting to do some post-game reactions. So always make sure you're following us on the Twitter account to see when we're going to do those. Me and Kenny may chop it up a little bit later tonight and give our reactions to that Anaheim Duck game. So otherwise, have a good one, everybody, and adios.
We know we're running it now. Watch the game change. Watch the game change. Watch the game change.